High in the wind-scoured peaks of the Nevada desert sits a mountain that once made men richer than kings, then quietly buried its own legend in dust. Today, wooden boardwalks creak under the boots of a few dozen tourists. Underneath those floorboards runs a hollowed-out maze of shafts and tunnels, some still slowly filling with water, that once produced more silver than anywhere else in the country. This is the story of the Comstock Lode, an underground frenzy of wealth that helped raise the skyline of San Francisco, minted overnight millionaires, and then watched the town that made them collapse back into dust just as fast. 6-story hotels, all-night saloons, men working 1,000 feet underground in scalding heat for a fortune that might kill them before they ever spent it. And at the center of the whole legend sits a joke. The man credited with discovering all that silver barely worked the claim he talked his way into, while the two brothers who actually found it died broke and freezing in the mountains before anyone even knew what they'd found. So how does a joke of a discovery turn into a city rich enough to help rebuild San Francisco and then fall apart within 20 years? A discovery nobody meant to make. Give credit where it's actually due first. Hosea Grosh and his brother Ethan Allen Grosh, everyone called him Allen, were trained prospectors working claims in the hills above Virginia City back in 1857. They found the silver first, 2 full years before anyone else got the credit for it. Then their luck ran out fast. Hosea drove a mining pick through his own foot that August, and the wound turned septic. He was dead within weeks. Allen packed up their ore samples and their notes and tried to cross the Sierra Nevada that same fall, racing for California to file the claim and raise money to work it properly. An early snowstorm caught him on the way. Frostbite took both his legs. Weeks later, in December, it took his life too. He never reached Sacramento. That left the discovery sitting there, unclaimed and undocumented, in a cabin the brothers had left in the care of a fellow prospector named Henry Comstock. Comstock was, by nearly every contemporary account, not a serious miner. People who knew him called him a loudmouth. He earned the nickname Old Pancake because he couldn't be bothered to bake his own bread and just ate flapjacks instead. Then, in the spring of 1859, 2 other miners, Peter O'Reilly and Patrick McLaughlin, hit rich ore nearby, on ground that likely traced back to the Grosh brothers' original find. Comstock rode up, claimed the land was his from some old ranching claim he'd never worked, talked his way into a share of a strike he hadn't lifted a finger to find. The lode still carries his name. Comstock sold his interest for around $11,000, a fortune at the time, but a rounding error against what was still buried in that mountain, and sank the money into 2 general stores that both failed within a couple of years. He spent the rest of his life drifting through Oregon, Idaho, and Montana, chasing a second strike that never came. In September of 1870, broke and, by most accounts, unraveling, he died near Bozeman, Montana, by his own hand. The man whose name sits on the richest silver deposit in American history died with nothing in a state he'd only ever passed through, forgotten by the very people who once called him the father of the lode. Silver fever hits the desert. For months, nobody understood what they actually had. O'Reilly and McLaughlin were digging for gold, not silver, and every time they hit a heavy blue-gray clay clogging their equipment, they cursed it and shoveled it aside. Someone finally packed a sample over the Sierra Nevada to an assayer in Grass Valley, California in the summer of 1859. The verdict came back and changed everything. That useless blue mud was silver sulfide of extraordinary purity, richer than anything found before it in the American West. Word spread fast, the way it always does when someone says richer than anyone has ever seen. Miners abandoned the California goldfields by the thousands and crossed the mountains in the opposite direction for once, chasing what newspapers were already calling the Washoe Rush. A scattering of tents and dugouts became a real town within a couple of years. It kept growing straight through the 1860s and into the 1870s. By the mid-1870s, Virginia City held an estimated 25,000 people, with some counts pushing closer to 30,000 once you include the neighboring town of Gold Hill. That made it by a wide margin the most important industrial city between Denver and San Francisco. Banks opened, churches too, 6 of them eventually. A red light district that never really closed. A railroad in 1869 so steep and switchbacked people nicknamed it the crookedest railroad in the world. A stock exchange, competing newspapers, an opera house. All of it in under a decade on ground that had been canvas tents and dugouts a few years before. If you like watching towns rise this fast, hit subscribe because we haven't even gotten to the good part yet. The Bonanza Kings. By the early 1870s, the easy surface ore was drying up, and plenty of people figured the Comstock had already given up its best ground. Then 4 men proved everybody wrong. John Mackay, James Fair, James Flood, and William O'Brien. 3 of them born in Ireland, the 4th born in New York to Irish immigrant parents. All 4 started with next to nothing. Mackay worked his way up from $4 a day as a placer miner. Flood and O'Brien ran a saloon in San Francisco before they ever touched a mining stock. In 1871, the 4 of them pooled roughly $100,000 and quietly bought control of a mine called Consolidated Virginia, ground that most of the smart money had already written off. In March of 1873, deep underground, their crews broke into an ore body more than 1,200 feet deep and over 50 feet wide in places, so rich that workers had to mix in waste rock just to run it through the stamp mills. Newspapers called it the Big Bonanza. Stock that opened around $4 or $5 a share was trading above $700 within 2 years. The combined speculative value of their 2 mines approached $1 billion. Mackay, Fair, Flood, and O'Brien became the Bonanza Kings. 4 of the wealthiest men on earth, built entirely on a bet everyone else had already walked away from. They weren't the only ones who cashed out early and walked away richer. George Hearst bought a 1/6 stake in the nearby Ophir mine back in 1859 for about $3,000. It made his fortune, and decades later, that fortune put his son in charge of a newspaper called the San Francisco Examiner. Down in the mines themselves, an engineer named Adolph Sutro spent close to a decade fighting the mining companies for the right to build a 4-mile drainage tunnel meant to pump scalding water out of the deepest shafts. By the time his tunnel finally broke through in 1878, the boom he'd fought a decade to serve had already crested. It kept draining water out of that mountain for decades. It just never got to matter the way he'd planned. Then there was the newspaper man. In February of 1863, a failed prospector turned reporter named Samuel Clemens was writing for the town's paper, the Territorial Enterprise, when he signed an article with a new name for the first time, Mark Twain. The Enterprise had already built a reputation for printing stories that weren't strictly true, and Twain fit right in. A few months earlier, before he even had his pen name, he'd published a piece describing the discovery of a petrified man sitting cross-legged in the mountains, fully preserved down to his features. Newspapers across the country reprinted it as straight news. Not a word of it was real. It was aimed as a private joke at a local official, and it worked so well, he admitted, years later, that fooling that many people gave him a satisfaction he never fully shook. All of this made a handful of men obscenely rich. It also made Virginia City one of the most dangerous places in America to punch a clock. Mansions above, hell below. Up top, all that money built mansions. Down below, it nearly killed the men who mined it. Mine owners filled Victorian mansions with furniture shipped in from Europe. Virginia City hosted touring stage productions and orchestras that wouldn't have looked out of place in San Francisco or New York. But that wealth sat directly on top of some of the worst working conditions in the country. Miners descended thousands of feet into rock where temperatures regularly passed 100 degrees. They fought scalding water, choking heat, and cave-ins for wages that came with a real chance you wouldn't make it back to the surface. The town's luck ran out briefly on October 26, 1875. A knocked-over lamp in a boarding house started a fire that tore through more than 30 blocks of Virginia City in a matter of hours, driven by dry timber and strong winds. More than 8,000 people lost their homes that day. Losses were estimated near $10 million. And yet, within about a year, the city had largely rebuilt itself, bigger in places than before, including a new 6-story international hotel with the first elevator in the state. If you want proof a boomtown still believed in its own future, that's it right there. That same wealth carried weight far beyond Nevada. You'll often hear that Comstock silver directly funded the Union War effort, a line still taught in Nevada classrooms. Here's the problem with that version. Nevada didn't become a state until October of 1864, near the war's end. And the real flood of Comstock money, the big bonanza, didn't arrive until 1873, 8 years after the war was already over. What Nevada actually gave Lincoln in 1864 was 3 electoral votes and a friendly legislature at a moment he badly needed both. What isn't in dispute is what came next. San Francisco banks and investors poured money into Comstock mines and mills through the 1860s and the 1870s, and that money flowed straight back into San Francisco real estate, banking, and skylines. A dusty mining camp in the Nevada desert helped build one of America's great cities 200 miles away. None of it looked like it was ever going to end. When the silver ran out. Production on the Comstock peaked around 1876, when the mines pulled roughly $36 million worth of silver and gold out of the ground in a single year. It felt, at the time, like it might never stop. But underground, the richest and most accessible ore bodies were already running thin, and every year the remaining silver sat deeper, hotter, and more expensive to reach. By 1880, most serious observers considered the Comstock played out. In 1882, water finally overwhelmed the pumps and flooded the lowest levels of the mines for good, sealing off ground that might have held more silver but was no longer worth the cost of reaching it. There was no single dramatic collapse, no crash, no one headline day when it all fell apart. It was a slow bleed. Mining stock worth roughly $300 million combined in 1875 was worth less than $7 million by 1881, something close to 98% of that paper wealth gone in 6 years. Miners and their families left for the next strike, first to nearby Bodie, California, then farther afield, one household at a time. Story County, home to Virginia City, held as many as 25,000 people at its peak. By the early 20th century, that number had fallen to around 3,500. By 1930, it was closer to 500. That pattern should sound familiar to anyone who's watched a modern factory town lose its one big employer. There's rarely a single dramatic day when everything ends. It's a slow drain, a few families at a time, until a town that once needed 6 churches and 100 saloons can't fill either one. From ghost town to gift shop. By the early 1900s, Virginia City was a shadow of itself. A few thousand residents, fading mines, a town circling the drain. Then, in the 1930s, new federal controls raised the price of gold, and a modest wave of small-scale mining brought a little life back to the area, along with paved streets through downtown. It wasn't the boom returning, it was just enough to keep the town from vanishing outright. The real second act came later, and it was built on tourism instead of ore. People started showing up not to mine the mountain, but to see what the mining had built. In 1961, Virginia City and the surrounding district were designated a National Historic Landmark, one of the largest historic districts in the country. Today, more than 2 million visitors a year walk the same wooden boardwalks the Bonanza Kings once walked. They step into saloons still doing business on C Street. They tour the Fourth Ward School. They ride restored cars on the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, the same crooked switch-backed line that used to haul silver ore down the mountain. The town that once produced more silver than any other place in the country now survives by selling its own history back to the people who come to see it. Virginia City's story isn't really about silver. It's about what happens when a place builds its entire identity, its entire economy, around one finite thing in the ground. For 20 years, that bet paid off spectacularly. Millionaires were made overnight, an opera house rose out of the desert, and a mining camp helped bankroll the growth of a major American city. Then the thing in the ground ran out, the way finite things always do, and the people who could leave left. You can still walk those streets today. The buildings are real. The mine shafts really do run thousands of feet under your boots. And somewhere under Mount Davidson, water is still slowly filling tunnels that once held more silver and gold than most people back then had ever seen in one place. If you want more stories like this one, towns that rose on a single bet and either broke that bet or got broken by it, subscribe and stick around. There are a lot more mountains left to dig into.